My entire career is built on telling the real from the fake. As a senior art appraiser in New York, my clients paid millions for my ability to spot a single misplaced brushstroke, a pigment that was just one shade off. I prided myself on that clarity, and I thought I knew my husband, Daniel, with that same certainty. That Tuesday morning, he was on a video call with me, his face filling my screen from his home office, looking handsome and familiar. He was a masterpiece I thought I knew by heart. But a call from my sister, a pilot on a business class flight to Paris, delivered an impossible truth, a truth that would force me to see that the life I had so carefully curated was a brilliant, devastating forgery. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Clara Vance, and my entire career is built on telling the real from the fake. As a senior art appraiser for a world-renowned auction house in New York, my clients paid millions for my ability to spot a single misplaced brushstroke, a pigment that was just one shade off from what the artist would have used in the 1880s. I could tell you if a Monet was genuine from 10 paces away by the way the light hit the impasto. I prided myself on that clarity, that absolute certainty, and I thought I knew my husband, Daniel, with that same unwavering confidence. He was, to me, a masterpiece of a man, charming, successful, a respected art dealer whose gallery was the darling of the Upper East Side. Our life was perfectly curated, a collection of beautiful moments housed within the elegant walls of our penthouse overlooking Central Park. That Tuesday morning began with the soft clink of porcelain as I set my teacup down. I was at the auction house, preparing for a major contemporary art sale, but took a moment for my daily video call with Daniel. He told me he was working from his home office, fighting off a slight cold and not wanting to spread germs. His face filled my screen, handsome and familiar. The deep blue of his sweater a perfect complement to the impressionist painting hanging on the wall behind him, our painting. The one he'd bought me for our 5th anniversary. He looked perfect, every detail in place, a living portrait of the man I loved. But a second call, a call from my sister, Lena, from 30,000 feet in the air, delivered an impossible truth that would shatter the frame of my entire existence. Lena's voice, usually calm and professional in her role as a pilot, was tight with confusion. Clara, I don't know how to say this, and you're going to think I'm crazy, but I swear Daniel is on my flight. I felt a small, disbelieving laugh escape my lips. I gestured to my iPad, where Daniel was still visible, listening patiently. Lena, that's impossible. I'm looking at him right now. He's in his office at home. The line was silent for a moment. The hum of the aircraft a distant whisper. No, Clara, she insisted, her voice dropping lower. He's in business class, seat 4A. He's with a woman with fiery red hair, and he's wearing the Patek Philippe watch you gave him for his birthday. I saw it clearly when he handed me his glass. My blood ran cold. I looked back at the screen, at Daniel's wrist resting on his desk. He was wearing the watch. My mind scrambled for a rational explanation, a doppelganger, a long-lost twin. Anything to make sense of the paradox. That can't be right, I stammered, trying to keep my voice even. Daniel looked up from his screen, his brow furrowed with concern. Everything okay, darling? He asked, his voice a warm, familiar balm that now felt like a lie. I forced a smile. Just Lena, pre-flight jitters. I made an excuse and ended the call with my sister, promising to call her back the moment she landed in Paris. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs, but my face remained a mask of professional composure. I turned my full attention back to the video call, my appraiser's eye now scanning not for pleasure, but for flaws. He looked exactly right. The lighting was perfect. The sounds of our apartment a distant siren, the hum of the air conditioning were all there. I decided to test him. A small, simple test. Daniel, I said, my tone casual. Could you do me a favor, pan the camera over to the ficus tree in the corner? I think I forgot to water it this morning, and I want to see if it's wilting. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Sorry, love. The stand is a bit finicky today. I'd have to get up and move it. I'll check the plant as soon as we're done. It was a plausible excuse, but a seed of pure, cold dread was planting itself in my stomach. Then it happened. As he was speaking, a common housefly, an insignificant intruder in our pristine apartment, buzzed into the frame. It flew lazily across the screen. A tiny black speck against the backdrop of our life. It moved towards Daniel's head, and just as it reached the edge of his temple, it vanished. It didn't fly past him. It simply ceased to exist for a split second before reappearing on the other side. It was a digital artifact, a rendering error, a blink and you'll miss it glitch in the fabric of my reality. My breath caught in my throat. The image of my husband in his office, the sounds, the lighting, it was all a projection. It was a deep fake, a sophisticated, real-time forgery. And the man I was talking to wasn't in our home at all. He was on a plane to Paris. The rest of the workday was a blur. I moved through the motions of my job with the detached precision of an automaton. I evaluated a Rothko, debated the provenance of a de Kooning. My voice calm, my hands steady. Inside, my mind was a raging storm. Every memory, every shared moment with Daniel was now suspect. How long had this been going on? Who was the woman with the red hair? I left the auction house at 5 p.m. sharp. The city lights of Manhattan blurring into streaks of gold and white as my taxi sped towards home. The apartment felt different the moment I walked in. No longer a sanctuary, but a crime scene where the victim was my own life. It was silent, empty. There was no sign of Daniel. No indication he had ever been there that day. I walked into his home office, the room that had been his digital stage. It was immaculate, as always. The books on the shelves were perfectly aligned. The desk was clear except for his closed laptop. I ran my hand over the leather chair where his deepfake had been sitting. It was cold. I knew I couldn't confront him. Not yet. An accusation without irrefutable proof would be dismissed as hysteria. My entire career was based on evidence. And I would approach this the same way. I would build a case against my own husband. Piece by agonizing piece, that night, when he called me from his hotel in Paris, his voice filled with feigned surprise about a last-minute client emergency. I played the part of the supportive, slightly disappointed wife. The performance of my life had just begun. My first step was to find an ally, someone I could trust who understood the world I had just been thrust into. I called Maya, a friend from college who had gone on to become a cybersecurity expert, specializing in digital forensics. We met at a quiet bar in the West Village, the kind of place with dark wood and low lighting where secrets felt safe. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I took out my tablet, played the recording of my video call with Daniel, and pointed to the exact moment the fly disappeared. Maya leaned in. Her eyes, accustomed to seeing patterns in code, immediately recognized the anomaly. She replayed it 3 times, her expression shifting from curiosity to grim certainty. That's a real-time rendering loop. Clara, she said, her voice low. This isn't amateur hour, this is sophisticated, expensive software. Someone built a digital replica of his office? Her confirmation was both terrifying and validating. I wasn't going crazy, this was real. Can you find out where the call actually originated from? I asked. Maya nodded slowly. It'll be routed through a series of proxy servers to mask the location, but I can try to trace it. It will take time. She looked at me, her professional demeanor softening with concern. Clara, what is going on? Who would do this? I took a deep breath and told her everything: the call from Lena, the woman on the plane, the watch. As I spoke, the narrative of my perfect marriage unraveled into a tangled mess of lies. Maya listened without interruption, her gaze steady. When I was finished, she simply said, "A deception of this magnitude always has a paper trail. We need to look at his finances." Following Maya's advice, I delved into our financial records. As I had managed our joint investments for years, I had full access. I spent the weekend hunched over my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark living room, transforming me from a wife into an investigator. At first, everything seemed normal: salary deposits, mortgage payments, credit card bills for restaurants and stores we frequented. But then I started digging deeper into Daniel's business accounts, the ones I rarely looked at. And there it was, a pattern of large, regular payments to a shell corporation based in Belgium. The company's name was Viridian Restorations. A quick search revealed it was a high-end art restoration studio. The director's name was listed as Isabelle Dubois. I found a photo of her online, on the studio's archaic website. It was a small, grainy headshot, but there was no mistaking the cascade of fiery red hair. She was the woman on the plane. The payments were substantial, totaling over $2 million in the last year alone, far more than any legitimate restoration work would cost. It was a thread, and I knew I had to pull it. I created a separate, encrypted folder on my personal drive and began to document everything, every transaction, every discrepancy, building my case with the same methodical patience I used when authenticating a multi-million-dollar painting. Each piece of evidence felt like a betrayal, a small cut that deepened the wound. While Maya worked on tracing the digital breadcrumbs, I had to continue living with the man on my screen, the digital ghost who wore my husband's face. He called every day from Paris, his deepfake now situated in what was supposedly his hotel room, a generic but convincing space. I had to act normally, to ask about his day, to tell him I missed him, each word tasting like ash in my mouth. I decided to set another test, a non-technical one based on something a machine couldn't replicate: a shared memory. During a call, I adopted a warm, nostalgic tone. "I was thinking about our first trip to Florence," I said, letting a soft smile play on my lips. "Do you remember that tiny trattoria we found near the Ponte Vecchio? The one with the grumpy old man and the most amazing truffle pasta?" His digital face lit up with a convincing smile. "Of course I do, darling. How could I forget we sat at that little table by the window for hours?" It was the perfect answer, except it was a lie. The trattoria I described didn't exist. Our favorite spot in Florence was a loud, boisterous pizzeria across the river. The memory was a fabrication, a trap. Daniel, the real Daniel, would have corrected me instantly, laughing at my mistake. But the man on the screen, fed by a script or a database of our shared history, had simply agreed with the prompt. The cold certainty settled deeper in my bones. The man I married was a stranger, and the life we had built was a carefully constructed forgery. The true breakthrough, the one that would provide the irrefutable proof I needed, came from my own area of expertise. The doubt that had been planted in my mind began to grow, twisting its roots around every aspect of our life. I started looking, truly looking, at the art in our own home. My gaze kept falling on the Monet he had given me for our anniversary, water lilies by the stream. It was the centerpiece of our collection, a symbol of his love and success on a Thursday afternoon, while Daniel was still in Europe finalizing his deal. I arranged for a trusted colleague from the auction house to bring a portable X-ray fluorescent scanner to the apartment. It was a small, discreet device used for non-invasive pigment analysis. My hands trembled as we set up the equipment. My colleague, an elderly man named Arthur who had taught me everything I knew, looked at me with worried eyes but asked no questions. We aimed the scanner at the canvas, and the machine whirred to life, analyzing the chemical makeup of the paint, layer by layer. I held my breath, watching the data stream onto the connected laptop. The results appeared in a series of graphs and charts, a language I understood better than my own emotions. And there it was. In the vibrant greens and blues of the water lilies, the scanner had detected significant traces of titanium white, a pigment that wasn't commercially available until the 1920s. Monet had painted this piece in 1907. He would have used lead white. I felt the air leave my lungs, a hollow, aching emptiness spreading through my chest. Arthur placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Clara," he asked softly. I couldn't speak. I just pointed at the screen. He peered at the results, and his face, etched with a lifetime of looking at art, fell. He understood. The masterpiece that hung in my living room, the symbol of my marriage, was a fake, a brilliant, stunningly executed, an utterly worthless forgery. All the other pieces of the puzzle clicked into place: the payments to Isabel the art restorer, the secret trips, the elaborate digital deception. Daniel wasn't just cheating on me, he was running a forgery ring, using his reputation to sell fakes to wealthy collectors while Isabel, his partner and mistress, created them. The trip to Paris wasn't for a client meeting. It was to sell the real Monet he had stolen from our wall. My grief for a moment was a physical weight, threatening to crush me. But then it began to change, transmuting into something cold, hard, and sharp. It became a diamond of pure, unadulterated rage. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had insulted my intelligence, my life's work. He had used the very thing I loved, the world of truth and beauty I had dedicated my life to, as the engine for his lies. I would not go to the police. Not yet. A legal battle would be messy and public. His punishment couldn't just be legal. It had to be precise. It had to target the one thing a man like Daniel valued above all else: his reputation. I was going to expose him as a fake in front of the entire world he had so desperately courted. My plan began to form, elegant and brutal in its simplicity. Daniel's gallery was scheduled to host its most prestigious event of the year in 3 weeks, a private auction of impressionist masterpieces. It would be the glittering centerpiece of the fall art season, attended by the wealthiest collectors, museum curators, and art critics in the world. This would be my stage. I spent the next 2 weeks in a state of feverish, focused activity. I slept little, fueled by coffee and a cold fury that had become my closest companion. I used my access and expertise to identify 3 other major clients Daniel had recently sold paintings to. My nights were spent drafting irrefutable, scientifically backed authentication reports, complete with spectral analysis and high-resolution imaging, proving that their multi-million-dollar artworks were forgeries. The most difficult part was choosing which client to approach. I settled on Mr. Kenji Tanaka, a Japanese industrialist known for his ruthless business practices and his even more intense passion for collecting French art. He was Daniel's biggest client, having just purchased a Renoir for $32 million. He was also notoriously private and proud. To convince him, I had to present a case that was not only perfect but also offered him a way to control the narrative. I flew to Tokyo for a face-to-face meeting, presenting him with my report on his Renoir. I watched his face as he absorbed the data, his initial skepticism giving way to a stony, dangerous calm. I didn't just show him he was a victim. I showed him how he could become the man who exposed the art world's biggest fraud, a power play that would make him a legend. He listened, his dark eyes fixed on mine, and after a long silence, he gave a single, sharp nod. The night of the auction, the gallery was electric. Crystal flutes of champagne circulated, and the low hum of conversations about money and art filled the high-ceilinged space. I arrived alone, dressed in a simple, elegant black gown, a silent observer in my own play. Daniel was in his element, moving through the crowd with an easy charm, his arm around Isabel, whom he introduced as a brilliant conservator from Belgium. He saw me across the room and his smile widened, a perfect performance of a loving husband welcoming his wife. He walked over, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Darling, I'm so glad you could make it. I just flew in this morning. The lie was so effortless, it was almost beautiful." I simply smiled back and said, "I wouldn't have missed this for the world." The auction began. The first few pieces sold for astronomical sums. Then came the centerpiece of the evening, a stunning Degas sculpture. Daniel himself took the stage to introduce it, his voice resonating with passion and authority. He was at the absolute peak of his power, the king in his court. As the bidding began to climb, I saw Mr. Tanaka seated in the front row give me a subtle nod. It was time. He stood up. The room fell silent instantly. All eyes turned to him. Daniel paused, a flicker of confusion on his face. Mr. Tanaka did not speak. Instead, he raised a hand, and on cue, 2 of his assistants walked to the large screen behind the auction stage and connected a laptop. The screen, which had been displaying the Degas, flickered and changed. An image of Mr. Tanaka's Renoir appeared, followed by pages from my authentication report, high-resolution images of canvas weaves, spectral analysis charts, and close-ups of forged signatures flashed across the screen in a devastating, silent presentation. At the bottom of the final slide, in large, bold letters, were the words, "A certified forgery sold by Daniel Vance." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Daniel stood frozen on the stage, his face draining of all color. The mask of the charming art dealer disintegrated, revealing the pale, terrified fraud beneath. His reputation, built over decades, was incinerated in less than a minute. The cameras from the art news outlets, there to document a triumphant sale, turned their lenses on him, capturing his public execution for the world to see. The aftermath was swift and total. The auction ended in chaos. The next morning, the story was on the front page of every major newspaper. The art of the lie dealer. Daniel Vance exposed in massive forgery scandal. Lawsuits from dozens of defrauded collectors followed. And the federal authorities, alerted by Mr. Tanaka's lawyers, launched a full-scale investigation. Daniel and Isabel were arrested at the airport trying to board a flight to a country with no extradition treaty. The contents of their gallery, our apartment, and their offshore accounts were seized. My life, as I knew it, was over. But in its place, something new was beginning to grow. 6 months later, the dust had begun to settle. The divorce was finalized, a quiet, administrative process that felt anticlimactic after the explosive end of our marriage. I had sold the penthouse, its walls now stripped of their beautiful lies. I resigned from my position at the auction house, needing a clean break from a world that now felt tainted. With a portion of the settlement, I established a new foundation, a nonprofit organization I named the Veritas Project. Our mission was simple: to provide museums, smaller galleries, and independent collectors with access to the same cutting-edge authentication technology that had exposed Daniel, protecting our shared cultural heritage from the predators who sought to corrupt it. My new office is smaller, located in a modest building in Chelsea, but it's filled with light and purpose. The work is challenging and fulfilling in a way my old job never was. I no longer determine the price of things, but their truth. The other day, a young, earnest curator from a small university museum came to me. He brought a painting that had been donated, a supposed lost work by a minor 17th century master. He was desperate for it to be real, for his small museum to have its own masterpiece. He watched me with nervous eyes as I conducted the analysis. After I was done, I had to give him the bad news. It was a 19th century imitation. His face fell, the disappointment palpable. He looked at me and asked, his voice full of despair, "In a world with so many fakes, how can we ever be sure of what's real?" I looked from his crestfallen face to the beautiful lie on the easel. I thought of Daniel, of the digital ghost on my screen, of the perfect forgery that had hung on my wall. And for the first time, I felt not anger, but a profound sense of peace. I smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Because," I said, my voice steady and clear, "a forgery always has a flaw. It always has a tell. You just have to know where to look."